Thanks for joining me for another Unmuted with Marsha. In Tennessee, the number one issue that you're writing in about is all about the border. And what are we going to do about that border? Because every town has turned into a border town, every state a border state, because of this porous southern border. Now, somebody that you've been hearing from since his days in the Trump administration, and by the way, he's got over 30 years experience in law enforcement, border policy, and is now the visiting fellow on immigration, border, and China policy over at the Heritage Institute. And that is Mark Morgan. I know he will be familiar to so many of you. So Mark, thanks for joining us, and thanks for talking with us a little bit about the border this morning. And let me just ask you right off the bat, what should the Biden administration do today to secure this border?
Well, first of all, they should, what they can do, Senator, right away is actually comply with what the courts have said they should do, and that's to reinstate fully the Remain in Mexico program. Senators, you know, because you've been a champion of this, your staff, yourself, you're very knowledgeable of this issue. And we know that the driving a part of this crisis was families illegally coming to the border. And why? Because they knew that that was their passport in the United States to be released and never be heard from again. But President Trump and the great men and women who worked for him, they really develop a network of tools, authorities, and policies. And the Remain in Mexico is one of those that absolutely drastically secured our borders and ended catch and release and reduced the flow of illegal immigration by 75%.
And we know that we've never had numbers like this crossing the southern border. So there's been 1.5 million that we have apprehended this year. I think I've got that number correct, right?
Yeah, that's correct, Senator. You absolutely.
Okay. And how high do you think that number will go by the time we get to the end of the year? Because, we heard all of this talk about, it's only the spring when they come. And then, it's too hot during the summer, but here they came in the summer. It tapers off by the end of the year in the fall, but it's not tapering off. So talk to me about where you think that number lands and why this is no longer a seasonal progression.
Yeah, Senator, again, you're spot on. And look, this has been just one example of many spin, misdirection, lies being told by this administration, especially the chief architect of their open border policy, Secretary Mayorkas of DHS, right? They said there's nothing to see here. It's seasonal, as you just described. And we warned them before. We've warned the American people since that it was just a lie and it wasn't true. And that has been borne out. Look, the last 2 months, we saw numbers of over 200,000 in the 30-day period. We haven't seen numbers like that in 2.5 decades. And we just saw the 15, 20,000 that rushed the border in Del Rio, and the numbers are still coming. And look, it's common sense. Weather has nothing to do with it. It's not seasonal. It's a lie. It's a distraction. When your border policies are open, you're telling the entire world, if you make it to our border illegally, we're going to release you, we're going to reward you, and you'll be able to stay here illegally. Of course, they're going to come, and that's where we're at. And Senator, if I could, just for a second, kind of foot stomp on the fact that here we have, and you in Tennessee, look, this is extremely an important message because what you said is spot on. Every town, city, and state in this country is a border town, city, and state. What happens at our southwest border does not stay at the southwest border. Drugs that are pouring in are making the way to every town, city, and state, including the great state of Tennessee. Gang members, criminal aliens that are getting away, they're making their way to every town, city, and state. Another number we don't talk about is the number of gotaways. Those individuals are getting past the Border Patrol frontline defense because they're pulled off the line to process families and unaccompanied minors. 400,000 have gotten a past a Border Patrol agent. And again, they've made their way into every state in this country, including Tennessee.
So when you add those 400,000, we would be at 1.9 million.
Right now.
Correct?
So yeah, that's correct. And that's a good point. So that's what I say. We're right there. And by the end of the year, you're looking at easily this calendar year, 2 million apprehensions, 2 million. And think again, this administration is lying. They'll say stuff like, oh, they're either being removed or put in removal proceedings. The secretary says that, Senator, when he says removal proceedings, your constituents need to understand what that means is they're being released to the United States. So of that 1.6 million apprehensions right now, I'm being conservative when I say 700,000 of those were released into the United States. You add on the 400,000 gotaways. So you're looking at right now under this administration, over 1 million illegal aliens have either been intentionally, willfully released or gotten away into this country. That is just, that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, when you think about that in terms of the size of cities, or in terms of the size of a congressional district, you see the impact that this is happening. I want to go back to something that you were just talking about with the drugs, because when you look at the cartels and these trafficking organizations, I think one of the components, and I have to tell you, I was speaking to a group recently and somebody said, I never even thought about that. And it is that the cartels completely control access to the border. And you do not cross unless you have paid the cartel or you have agreed to work out your passage, which is slavery, once you get to the United States. Talk a little bit about the drug cartels and the trafficking cartels, the sex trafficking, human trafficking, and the gangs, and kind of what you know of how that system works.
Again, Senator, you're spot on. I couldn't have said it better myself. Your constituents need to understand that everything that happens in the Southwest border is controlled by the cartels. There's not a single person, product, or entity that crosses that Southwest border unless the cartels and smuggling organizations approve it and get paid for it. And that's another reason when you have open borders, ultimately who wins is the cartels. Their influence gets stronger. They're more powerful, and they're more rich today because of this administration. But look, let's take trafficking, for example. A lot of the individuals being smuggled, they're simultaneously being trafficked. They just don't know it yet. Their exploitation doesn't just end with their journey once they illegally enter the United States. Look, we know 30% of young women and children are abused and raped on the way up. But that once they get to the United States, as you just described, a lot of these individuals are put into servitude, including sex slavery and et cetera, to, quote, pay off the cartels and smugglers for them being smuggled in the United States, and their horrific exploitation continues in the United States. But the American people, because that's kind of underground, they don't see it. They don't think it exists. It's happening in every state in this country, including Tennessee. And real quick, if I could talk about the drugs, look, as an FBI agent, I worked MS-13, one of the most violent, prolific transnational gangs that we have in our country. That gang started in the Northern Triangle countries. And they are absolutely illegally entering our country every single day. Just this past week, Border Patrol put on their website how they apprehended a MS-13 gang member. Those gang members are in every major metropolitan city in this country. The drugs, look, in Tennessee, I don't care, anywhere in Tennessee, if there is a meth overdose, Senator, I guarantee you that meth came from the Southwest border. So when we talk about the Southwest border, this is not about illegal immigration. It's first and foremost about border security, of which illegal immigration is a subset. But when you open your border up to any crisis, any threat, you're opening your borders up to the vast, complex threats facing our country.
Well, and one of the things that has, as I've talked to our local law enforcement, is you just are giving the cartel the ability to piggyback off the federal government when you have that border open. And when it comes to the human trafficking, they get people to the border. That individual has a name and address of where they're supposed to go. And the federal government, the U.S. taxpayer, is paying for the bus ticket or the plane ticket and the food, the clothing, and the shelter to get them there, which is astounding.
Yeah, Senator, again, you're spot on. Look, I go a step further because I'm not a politician, so I could do this, right? I actually say that right now, the Biden administration, they're complicit in completing the smuggling chain. Our United States government is complicit. Without the United States government's open border policies, without the United States government, this administration doing exactly as you said, the flow of illegal immigration, you would see it reduced by 70, 75%. You would see the cartels smuggling days basically go out of business, catch and release would be ended, and their bank accounts would be negatively impacted. That's exactly what we saw under the Trump administration. As soon as President Biden took over, he instantaneously made the cartels billions of dollars each month overnight. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry that this administration turned back on. And it's like I said, it's not just about illegal immigration. You've got 50% of Border Patrol agents pulled off the line to be basically daycare providers and humanitarian assistant deliveries. That's not their job. Look, take Del Rio, for example, because that's in the news right now. Yeah. Del Rio is one of 9 sectors along the southwest border. They have 224 miles in their sector. For about 4 or 5 days, because of the invasion of Haitians and others there, every single Border Patrol agent was at that bridge processing. Guess what happened? 224 miles of that border went unpatrolled by Border Patrol agents, wide open for drugs to pour in, criminal aliens to pour in, and drug members to pour in.
You know, it is just astounding to me. And when I'm talking with Tennesseans and I talk about the fact that the federal government actually is the one who finishes that process for the cartels, people just can't believe it. And I feel it's such a humanitarian crisis because you have these women and girls that come in and say, here's the address that I'm going to. And once they get there, they are in some form of domestic servitude or sex trafficking, and their life is not their own.
That happens all the time, Senator. Look, and this is what I've been saying. With our open border policies in this administration, they've separated more families than any other administration in our history. They just separate them at their home country. Right now, I'm being conservative. There's been over 120,000 unaccompanied minors who have come illegally to this border. They made the decision back in their home country to separate themselves, and their parents did, to put their lives in the hands of smugglers, to give their last dime. Why? Because this administration said, if you get to our border illegally, we're going to bring you in. They subjected themselves to abuse, to exploitation. Look, these are all facts. This is not opinion, this is facts. Right now, you can talk to a lifelong Democratic sheriff along the southwest border that said he's found more dead migrants this fiscal year than his 42 years in public service. You can talk to United States Border Patrol that have implemented over 9,000 rescues of immigrants trying to illegally enter the border. Why? Because this administration says it's worth everything, Senator, including risking your life. Because if you make it to our borders illegally, we're going to let you in, we're going to reward you, and then we're going to dismantle ICE systematically so that they will not enforce immigration law, they will not enforce the constitutional responsibility of America, and we're going to allow you to stay in this country illegally. Senator, who wouldn't come? I got to tell you, I wouldn't mind maybe risking my life too if that was where administration has abdicated all their constitutional responsibilities and opened their borders up.
Well, we know that is not true, and these people are being put into gangs and into labor gangs, into human trafficking rings. They're being turned into drug mules. The exposure to the humanitarian crisis is horrific, and the Biden administration is responsible for what is going on. Well, to everyone watching, keep up with Mark Morgan. You will find him at heritage.org. And Mark, so grateful for your continued work and focus on this issue. Let's hope we get this border secure. Thank you all. You'll find me at Marsha Blackburn.